Let me take you back to a small village named Maplewood, where life moved at a gentle pace, like the slow flow of the river that wound its way through the town. The cobblestone streets were lined with quaint cottages, their gardens bursting with colorful blooms. This was a place where everyone knew each other's names, where secrets were whispered under the stars, and where the familiar chime of the church bells marked the passing hours. I was just an ordinary guy, Eric Morrison, a high school chemistry teacher, passionate about the elements and the magic they held. My life was routine, filled with lesson plans and late-night grading. But behind that facade, I was wrestling with a storm brewing in my mind. It was a storm that would change everything. One crisp morning, while the leaves danced in the wind, I received a phone call that shattered my world. "Mr. Morrison, it's Dr. Green. We need to discuss your test results." The urgency in her voice sent chills down my spine. I remember sitting in my dimly lit classroom, the smell of chalk dust lingering in the air, as the words spilled from her lips. Stage II lung cancer. Prognosis, 2 years maybe. Time froze. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by the innocence of my students, yet I felt like I was floating in an abyss. I had a pregnant wife, Sarah, and a teenage son, Michael, who had cerebral palsy. How could I provide for them when my own future was so uncertain? Days turned into restless nights, my mind swirling with thoughts of my family's future. How could I secure a life for them when I wouldn't be around? I spent hours staring at the periodic table on my wall, recalling the countless experiments that had once brought me joy. Suddenly, a wild idea took root in my mind, a dangerous idea that could make all the difference. I remembered a former student, Jake Collins, a kid who had always been trouble but had a spark in him. He's street smart, I thought. I could partner with him and use my chemistry expertise to create something that could make money, fast. But what would I even say? I didn't want to admit to myself what I was contemplating. It was a rainy evening when I finally made the call. "Jake, can we meet?" I asked, my heart pounding. We met at a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of Maplewood, the kind of place where shadows danced in the corners and secrets were shared over steaming cups of coffee. As I laid out my plan, Jake's eyes widened. "You want to make meth?" he exclaimed, half laughing, half incredulous. I could see the wheels turning in his head. "This is insane, Mr. Morrison, but it could work." I felt a strange thrill at his reaction. Perhaps we were on the brink of something monumental or something catastrophic. We transformed my basement into a makeshift lab, a chaotic mixture of beakers and chemicals, a place where science collided with desperation. I had always loved the precision of chemistry, the way molecules reacted, how they transformed, but now it felt like I was dancing with danger. The first batch we made was far from perfect. The blue crystal glimmered under the fluorescent lights, but it wasn't what I envisioned. "Let's tweak this," I said, excitement coursing through my veins. With every attempt, I felt more alive, more focused, channeling my fear into my work. After several long nights, we finally struck gold. The product was breathtaking, pure, shimmering blue meth that sparkled like jewels. "We did it," Jake shouted, pumping his fist in the air. The thrill of success enveloped us like a warm blanket, but the shadows loomed large. Our first sale felt like stepping into a new world. We met a dealer in an abandoned parking lot, surrounded by rusting cars and graffiti. I held my breath as the transaction unfolded. "This is it, man. This stuff is gonna fly," Jake said, his enthusiasm infectious. I felt a rush of adrenaline, a dangerous high that had nothing to do with the product we were selling. As our business took off, the money flowed in like a river bursting its banks. I felt invincible, but deep down, a nagging voice whispered warnings. I bought Sarah a new car, something I never thought I could afford, and I saw the joy in her eyes. Michael seemed happier too, more secure in his future. But the joy was laced with anxiety. Each dollar earned came with a price. Jake began to embrace the dealer lifestyle, becoming bolder and more reckless. "We're kings now, Mr. Morrison. We can't stop," he exclaimed one night as we counted stacks of cash in my basement. I wanted to rein him in, to remind him of our original goal. But the allure of our newfound power was intoxicating. But success breeds suspicion. My brother-in-law, Tim, was a DEA agent, and he had started to catch wind of something amiss in Maplewood. I could see the shadows of his investigations creeping closer, and every family dinner filled me with dread. "You know, "Eric, there's a new batch of drugs hitting the streets," he remarked casually one night, his eyes narrowing as he scanned my face for a reaction. I could feel my heart racing, every instinct screaming to keep my secret buried. I had to stay one step ahead of him. "Just the usual high school drama, Tim," I replied, forcing a smile, the weight of my lies pressing down on me. As the pressure mounted, the cracks in my carefully constructed facade began to show. Sarah grew suspicious of my late nights and unexplained absences. "Eric, you're acting strange. Is everything okay?" she asked one evening, her brow furrowed with concern. I wanted to tell her the truth, to confess everything, but fear gripped me. I couldn't shatter her world like that. Instead, I brushed her off, offering half-hearted reassurances. "Just work stress, honey. I'm fine." But the guilt gnawed at me like a hungry wolf. One night, after a particularly lucrative deal, Jake and I were celebrating in my basement, surrounded by the spoils of our labor. But the atmosphere shifted when we heard sirens in the distance. Panic washed over us like a cold wave. "They're onto us," Jake shouted, his face pale with fear. We scrambled to hide our equipment, adrenaline coursing through our veins. I felt like I was losing control of everything I had built. "We need a plan," I said, my mind racing. The high from our success was quickly turning into a desperate scramble for survival. As the investigation intensified, I found myself spiraling deeper into the world of crime. I devised elaborate schemes to cover my tracks, but every move felt like a gamble. Jake became increasingly reckless, wanting to push the limits further. "Let's expand. We could take over Maplewood," he urged, eyes gleaming with ambition. I hesitated, torn between the allure of more power and the weight of the risk. But the thrill of the chase was intoxicating. "Okay, but we need to be smart about this," I finally agreed, feeling the line between right and wrong blur even further. With our operation growing, so did the pressure. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, and the anxiety started to seep into every aspect of my life. Sarah sensed my distance, and the worry in her eyes broke my heart. "Eric, I need you to be honest with me. Are you in some kind of trouble?" she pleaded one night. I wanted to reach out, to pull her close and confess everything. But fear held me captive. "No, it's just work, babe. I promise." I lied, the weight of my deceit threatening to crush me. Then came the day when everything unraveled. I was sitting in my car, the engine running, when I spotted Tim talking to Jake in a parking lot. My heart sank as I realized they were discussing me. I felt trapped like a cornered animal. "Jake, we need to meet," I texted, urgency bleeding through every letter. When we met, the tension was palpable. "They're onto you, Eric. They're looking for you," Jake said, his voice shaking. The walls were closing in, and I could feel the noose tightening around my neck. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. I could hear Sarah's soft breaths beside me, and I felt a deep sense of dread. How long could I keep this up? What would happen to my family when the truth came crashing down? I had created a monster, and now it was threatening to consume everything I loved. In that moment of despair, I made a decision. I would confront Tim. I needed to control the narrative, to protect my family at all costs. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. I was playing a dangerous game with everything on the line. The following evening, I met Tim at a quiet diner, the same place where I had met Jake. I was sweating, heart pounding as I approached his booth. "Tim, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "About what?" "I know something's going on, Eric," he replied, his eyes piercing. I felt exposed, like I was standing in front of a firing squad. "I'm not involved in anything illegal." "You have to trust me," I lied, desperately hoping my facade would hold. Tim stared at me, a mix of disbelief and determination in his gaze. "You're my brother-in-law. I care about you, but you need to stay away from this," he warned. I wanted to scream that it was too late for that. After our meeting, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I returned home to find Sarah waiting for me, her face drawn with worry. "Eric, please talk to me. You're not yourself," she begged. I could see the fear in her eyes, and it shattered my heart. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just tired," I lied again. But I could see the doubt lingering. Each lie felt like another stone in my backpack, dragging me down deeper into the darkness. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. I could feel the walls closing in, the noose tightening. Jake was getting more erratic, pushing boundaries I wasn't ready to cross. We need to take more risks. Eric, he insisted one evening, his enthusiasm bordering on reckless. No, Jake. We need to lay low. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. I was terrified of losing everything, my family, my life. But as Jake's ambition spiraled out of control, I felt helpless to stop him. One fateful night, we decided to make one last big sale. It felt like a gamble, but I needed the money to secure Sarah and Michael's future. We set up the deal at an abandoned warehouse, the atmosphere thick with tension. As we waited, I felt a sense of dread settle in my stomach. The deal was going smoothly until sirens blared outside, drowning out the muffled sounds of our transaction. "Run!" Jake shouted, panic in his eyes. I felt adrenaline surge through my veins as I sprinted for the back exit, my heart pounding. We darted through the alleyways, the sound of our pursuers echoing behind us. I was fueled by desperation, driven by the need to protect my family. "This way," I yelled to Jake, weaving through the maze of buildings, my mind racing. But as we rounded a corner, I caught sight of the flashing lights, the unmistakable insignia of law enforcement. My heart sank. "We have to split up," I shouted, knowing it was our only chance. We exchanged a look of fear and understanding before we parted ways. In the days that followed, I watched as my world crumbled. The police closed in on Jake, and I was forced to keep my head down, pretending everything was normal. Sarah and Michael were blissfully unaware of the chaos that had unfolded. But I couldn't shake the weight of my choices. I had chosen a path that led me into darkness, and now I was left to face the consequences. As I walked through Maplewood, I felt the familiar comfort of home, but it felt different, tainted by my secrets. In that quiet village, I learned that the line between right and wrong was thin, and the choices we make can lead us down paths we never intended to follow. And as I stood on the edge of everything I once knew, I realized that the true fight was just beginning. Ready to improve your English in a fun and engaging way? Start learning through stories today. Subscribe to Learn with Codson and dive into captivating stories that will help you expand your vocabulary, understand sentence structures, and practice pronunciation. Stories make learning English exciting and memorable. Join us on this journey and watch your language skills grow with each story. The voiceover in this video is given by Learn with Codson. Copying or re-uploading is prohibited.